My mother-in-law made the announcement at the family dinner. Not to me. About me. She stood at the head of the table, held her wine glass, and said to my sister-in-law, loud enough for me to hear every word, "I'm just saying that girls like her always have a reason when they marry a man like Daniel. Girls like her." I was sitting 2 chairs away. My plate was still full. My hands were flat on my knees because I had learned that flat hands look calm, even when everything inside you is trembling. Daniel had heard it. I could tell by the way he set his glass down. Slowly. Too slowly. He said nothing. Welcome to True Revenge Stories, where the truth always comes to light, no matter how long it stays buried. If this is your first time here, subscribe now and hit the bell so you never miss a story. My name is Lena Fisher. I am 32 years old. And this story does not begin that evening. It begins 4 years earlier, the day I met Daniel Hoffman, and the day his mother decided who I was, before she even knew my name. Daniel's mother, Ingrid Hoffman, was 58. Polished, precise, the kind of woman who always knew what a room should say about her. She had worked for 30 years at a private bank, knew the difference between old money and new money, and treated people accordingly. My family had no old money. My father, Klaus Fischer, had been a teacher. 30 years at a secondary school, history and geography, always the same brown coat in winter, always the same thermos of coffee on his desk. My mother worked at the local council office. We lived in a 3-room apartment in Heidelberg, took holidays in the Black Forest, and called it good. Ingrid called it modest. The word came at the first dinner. Daniel had brought me, 2 months after we met. Ingrid had cooked, elaborately, unnecessarily elaborately, the kind of cooking that sends a message. She asked about my family, my job, my parents. When I said my father was a teacher, she nodded. Slowly. With a small smile that contained nothing warm. How modest, she said. Then she turned to Daniel and spoke about something else. I looked at Daniel. He looked at his plate. That was the first time. It was not the last. Over the next 2 years, Ingrid collected statements about me the way other women collected porcelain. Each one insignificant on its own. Together, a complete picture of someone who did not belong here. She said Lena is charming, in a tone that meant charm was all I had. She said Lena is very ambitious, in a tone that meant ambition in someone like me was suspicious. She said to Daniel's sister once, very quietly but not quietly enough, that she hoped Daniel would one day see what really mattered. I was not what really mattered. I had told my father about Ingrid. Not everything. Just enough. My father was not a man who used many words. He listened with the patience of a man who had spent 30 years listening to teenagers who thought nobody understood them. Then he said, Lena, some people decide very early who others are. That says more about them than about you. That was all. 3 months after that conversation, my father received his diagnosis. And 8 months later, he was gone. He left me nothing I had expected. No house, no account, no grand gesture. He left me a letter. I did not find it immediately. It did not come by post. It came through a woman I had never seen before, who rang my doorbell 4 months after his death, holding a brown envelope, and said, "Your father asked me to deliver this to you personally." I let her in. What was inside that envelope changed everything Ingrid Hoffman had ever said about me. Not because it proved I had money, but because it proved that my father had known exactly what was coming. The woman's name was Barbara Steiner. She was in her mid-60s, with the calm, precise manner of someone accustomed to important things without being impressed by their importance. She sat at my kitchen table, placed the brown envelope in front of her, and folded her hands over it as if protecting it. "Your father has known me for 20 years, she said. I was his attorney." I looked at her. My father had an attorney. I had not known that. He contacted me 18 months ago, she continued. Shortly after you told him about your mother-in-law. I felt something tighten in my chest. He told me he was worried, Barbara said. Not about money. About you. He said he knew the kind of people who give others labels early. He said he wanted to make sure you had something in your hands when the label became too loud. She opened the envelope. Inside were 3 things. A letter in my father's handwriting. A document with a notary's letterhead. And a smaller envelope, cream-colored, on which he had written in his neat teacher's handwriting, for the right moment. I touched the small envelope without opening it. Barbara slid the notary document across to me. Your father set up an account 18 months ago, she said. In your name. He deposited into it every month until he could no longer do so. He instructed me to deliver it to you personally after he was gone. Not by post. He wanted to make sure I explained to you why he did it. I looked at the document. An account number. My name. A figure. 91,000 euros. I sat at my kitchen table and could not process the number immediately. Not because it was too large. But because I did not know where it had come from. Barbara explained it quietly. My father had held a life insurance policy for 30 years. A small monthly premium he had always paid without announcement. Plus savings he had never spent because, as Barbara said, he was a man who needed very little for himself. I knew that. My father had worn the same brown coat for 10 years. And then, she said, he explained to me why he did not want the money to go to your mother. Not because he did not love her, but because he knew she would use it for the house, for security, for everything practical. She looked at me. He wanted you to have something that belongs to you, she said. Not your family. Not your husband. Not your mother-in-law. You. I opened the letter. My father's handwriting was neat and slightly too large, as always, the handwriting of a man who had spent decades writing on blackboards. Lena, it said. Just my name. No dear or my daughter. Simply my name, direct, the way he was. If you are reading this, I am no longer here. I hope you are not alone when you read it, but I suspect you are somehow anyway. I stopped breathing. You told me about this woman. Not much, but enough. I know this kind of person, Lena. I taught for 30 years. I know how it feels when someone has decided who you are before you have opened your mouth. I wiped my eyes. I did not want to cry before I had finished reading. He wrote, I am not giving you this money to prove you are worth something. You are worth something, that has always been true. I am giving it to you so you can make decisions without being afraid. Then, in the last line, was one sentence. Show the letter when the moment comes. You will know when. I set the letter on the table. Barbara sat quietly. She had clearly given me time. If this story is hitting close to home, subscribe now and hit the bell. What comes next you will not forget. I looked at the small cream envelope. The one marked for the right moment. I left it closed. Not yet. But I had a feeling the moment was closer than I thought. The moment came 3 weeks later. Ingrid had invited us to a family dinner. Not asked. Invited, in the tone that expected no objection. Daniel's sister Katerina would be there, her husband, the children. A normal family dinner, Ingrid said on the phone. Normal family dinners at the Hoffmans were never normal. I took the small cream envelope from the drawer where it had been sitting for 3 weeks and put it in my pocket. I did not know what was inside. I had not opened it. But my father had said I would know the moment. We drove there. Daniel drove. He knew about Barbara Steiner's visit, the account, the letter. I had told him everything that same evening. He had sat quietly for a long time. Then he had said, "That explains a lot about your father." I had nodded. He had not asked what I intended to do with the money. That was one of the reasons I had married him. The dinner began normally. Soup, then meat, then the usual conversation that always revolved around Ingrid's topics. Katerina talked about a trip. Her husband talked about his office. Ingrid nodded at the right moments. Then, between the main course and dessert, Ingrid said something to Katerina without lowering her voice, without looking at me, in the tone she used when she wanted me to hear without addressing me directly. She said, "It is nice when someone moves into a family they could never have had on their own." The silence was brief but complete. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the cream envelope. Placed it on the table beside my plate. Opened it slowly. Inside was a single folded page. I unfolded it. It was not a letter. It was a handwritten note, short, in my father's handwriting. "Lena," it said. "When you open this envelope, the moment has come. Then read this out loud." Below that, in his neat teacher's handwriting, were 4 sentences. I cleared my throat. Not loudly. Just enough. Ingrid looked at me. I read. My father had written, "My daughter Lena told me about a woman who decided who she was before she knew her. I taught for 30 years. I know how that ends. It ends with the person who was given the label living her life, and the person who gave it sitting alone with it." I folded the page. The table was silent. Ingrid looked at me. Then at the envelope. Then at Daniel. "What is that supposed to mean?" she said. Her voice was controlled, but something inside it was no longer entirely certain. "It means," I said calmly, "that my father knew me. And he knew this moment would come." Daniel placed his hand over mine. Katerina looked between us and her mother. Ingrid opened her mouth. I was only. I looked at her. Not angry. Not trembling. With the steadiness of someone who feels a foundation beneath them that they did not lay themselves, but that was laid for them. "I know what you said," I said. "Tonight and every other night. I heard it. All of it." Ingrid said nothing. I stood up. Not dramatically, simply up. Daniel stood with me. We drove home. Daniel said little. At a red light he placed his hand on mine. He said, "Your father was a wise man." "Yes," I said. The account sat untouched for 3 months. Then we opened a small design studio in Frankfurt, something I had been planning for years without ever starting, because Ingrid had once said creative careers were not for people who needed financial stability. The studio did well. Ingrid called once, 6 months later. Her voice was smaller. She said she had sometimes misjudged her tone. That was all. No real apology. Only the shadow of one. I said I had heard her. And hung up. Some people decide very early who others are. My father was right. That says more about them than about us. If this story moved you, write it in the comments. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it now and hit the bell. I will see you in the next story.